I want to welcome everybody to tonight's Solar Stories. This is a new session. We're calling this Royal Oak Solar Stories. My name is John Freeman. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, and I want to welcome all of you to our session this evening. We have a really special presentation tonight by Woody Gontina. Woody lives in Royal Oak, and he is renovating a 1935-year-old home, and he's building an addition onto it, and he's going to try and make it net zero energy. And Woody is going to explain what he means by this. Woody is also filming this entire process, so we may want to tap into the final video and show it to GLREA members, so other people can learn about the process Woody used as he renovated his home. Woody has a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management from Michigan State University, and he started a home building company in 2004, focusing on sustainable design and energy efficiency. Woody serves on the Royal Oak Planning Commission and is the Vice Chair of the Royal Oak Environmental Advisory Board. Woody is also GLREA's lead individual in Royal Oak for the Solarize program, which is an educational program we're utilizing all around the state to educate people about solar. And then we have a group buy program to bring down the cost of the homes for people. This event is being sponsored by Michigan Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Energy, otherwise known as EGLE, as well as Homeland Solar, McNaughton and McKay Electric Company, Iron Ridge Racking, and Harvest Solar. So again, we're very pleased to have all of you join us. Woody's going to make a presentation, but he's going to leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Woody Gontina, and thank you, Woody, for doing this.
Great, thank you, John, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us this evening. I'm going to share my screen here, hopefully the correct way. Okay, so as John had mentioned, I am undergoing a project where we are renovating a home, building an addition, where the ultimate goal is to get to net zero energy. And what that term means is that the home will produce as much energy as it consumes over the course of a year from a net basis. And the reason that's important to understand that is in any given moment, it may not be producing as much as it needs for that particular moment, but there's going to be other times where it's actually producing more than it needs, and we'll actually put that energy back onto the grid, as what we're planning for is a grid-tied system. So just wanted to define that a little bit, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the presentation here. Hopefully, there we go. So John kind of covered some of this already. Just want to give a quick bio about myself. I was born and raised in Southeast Michigan. I did have a construction management degree from Michigan State University. I won't say from how long ago, but immediately after graduating, I spent about 8 years in the Bay Area of California. And that's really where I cut my teeth and gained my introduction into sustainable design and construction. That middle picture there that you see is actually the last project that I worked on before moving back to Michigan in 2004. It was a 60-unit condominium and townhome project on a 1-acre site in the middle of downtown Palo Alto. It took us 2 years and 15 public hearings just to get the entitlements for that project. And the reason that I point this out is the approval for that project was largely based on the merits of the sustainability program that we put together for that particular project. Now, mind you, this was well over 20 years ago, and the developers of that project didn't really know what that meant. They just knew that the city was asking for that. And so I was tasked with putting together the sustainability plan for that project, which helped me learn quite a bit, because quite frankly, I didn't know as much as I know today. From there, I actually moved back to Michigan. I've been a 15-year Royal Oak resident. I was appointed to the Environmental Advisory Board in 2018. And the Environmental Advisory Board advises the City Commission on really all issues concerning environmental sustainability within the city, whether it be policies, programs, initiatives that have to do with energy waste reduction, climate, air quality, and a whole host of other sustainability issues. I'm also a Royal Oak Planning Commissioner. I've been since 2019. And some of these actions have led me to be a member of the task force that created Royal Oak's first Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. Through that, I also made the decision to start, as John had mentioned, Solarize Royal Oak. which happens to be one of the goals in our sustainability plan. So what's my why for doing this project? Well, the first thing is family. As our children and family have grown, so have our needs. And while we love the house that we're currently in Royal Oak, we've just sort of outgrown it. And thankfully, I love the city of Royal Oak, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to build our forever home here in Royal Oak as well. Also, climate change. I really feel that it's everybody's responsibility from all levels of government down to the individual to do what they can to combat climate change. It's a very real issue that we all need to be conscious of. Then also my ability to share my passion and experience. I've been very passionate about construction since a very, very young age. And for the past 25 years or so, had a focus with that passion in sustainability. And along with that, recognize the need for education. While I certainly understand construction because I live, breathe, and eat it, I realize that most people aren't as nerdy as me when it comes to understanding construction technology, especially sustainable techniques. So I recognized this project as an ability to show people different strategies and educate. So on that point of education, I want to touch a little bit on some of the sustainability work that we've done in Royal Oak. So as I mentioned, Royal Oak recently created a sustainability and climate action plan. It had 6 focus topics that you can see in the bottom right corner there. I was also a facilitator for the energy and buildings focus topic. And through doing that work of creating this plan, one of the things that became very clear to us was that addressing municipal operations alone were not enough. Our baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventory showed us that municipal operations were only responsible for about 1.4% of the total. So what that meant was the community and the residents were really going to have to step up and understand and implement things on their own in order for us to move that needle. So many of the actions that came out of that and made their way into that climate action, sustainability and climate action plan centered around community education. So this plan was adopted by the City Commission on May 9th of this year, so just a few months ago. And through all this work is when this project that we're about to discuss came up as well. We realized we could use this as one of the educational tools that we recognized through this sustainability plan would be very valuable for the residents. So what is the project? In brief, we're taking a home that was originally built in 1935. It's about 1,800 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. It was a premium home for the time. And the reason that I know this is I actually have the original drawings for the home. And I'm very fortunate to have a photo album of the original construction of the home, as well as had an opportunity to speak to the gentleman who was 3 years old when his father built the home. He's currently 89 and lives in Mason, Ohio. But through the work that I've been doing on the home, have been able to determine that certain construction details and understanding the era of when the home was built lead me to understand that it was a family of means that built the home, and the home was constructed of very high quality systems and materials. A quick example of that, again, 1935. The home itself was actually fully insulated, which I was not expecting. The basement was actually built a little deeper than what's indicated on the plan, which results in taller ceilings. So these are elements that tell me that there was thought and means that went into the production of the home. In 2021, we acquired the home and made the decision to keep as much of the home as possible. As you can see, it's a beautiful home on a nice corner lot. Of course, we're looking to build something a little bit bigger as we had grown out of the home that we're in, which is currently about 1,300 square feet. And so ultimately what we're hoping to achieve, and I'm hoping to complete it next year, the home will ultimately be 3,800 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, and again, our goal of net zero energy. So this home itself, sustainability is the driver of everything that we're doing there. Again, it's my background, it's my passion. And that starts from the inception of the project and the deconstruction versus the demolition portion. So in order to renovate the existing structure and bring it up to a performance standard that would help to meet this net zero goal, as you can imagine, we need to be quite invasive with how we're treating that structure. And in our case, because we are attempting to maintain as much of the brick cladding on the exterior of the home as possible, that means we have to actually access the exterior wall cavities from the interior of the home, which means a pretty significant deconstruction and removal of material from the interior of the home. But in doing that, we're not just throwing this material away. We actually were able to donate a majority of the interior, from hardwood floors to the doors, windows, light fixtures, cabinetry, brick pavers, things of that nature. I worked with a nonprofit out of Detroit called the Architectural Salvage Warehouse of Detroit. Based on the amount of materials that they were able to salvage from the home, we were able to receive about a $27,000 tax benefit for all that material. We worked with a third-party appraisal firm that essentially assigns that value. And the process is quite simple. ASWE came through the home initially, made a list of everything that they were interested in. As I began the project, had that list in front of me, and I was able to sort of selectively deconstruct the home to be able to take those elements and put them aside for ASWD. For items that still had useful value that they were not interested in, I actually relied on local social marketplace to either sell some of those things at a very nominal cost, or in most cases, actually give away much of the material. And the reasoning for this was more around the story of embodied energy savings. And for those that may not know what that term means, all of the energy that was expended to create those materials back in 1935 to begin with, if due to the nature of our project, of course, we had to remove those items. If those all ended up in a dumpster and then ultimately in a landfill, the energy would need to be expended again to recreate those materials to be used elsewhere, whether it's our home or another home. And so from a sustainability storyline perspective, that was really the driver of why we went through the deconstruction process versus a demolition process. And so to get to net zero energy, one of the most important things of the house are the various systems that we're going to be using. To call those out specifically, spray polyurethane foam, specifically closed cell foam, structural insulated panels, both ground source and air source heat pump, an induction cooktop, a condensing ventless dryer, and then ultimately rooftop solar. With the logic behind all these systems being, we need to air seal and insulate the existing structure. We are using a high performance system with the structural insulated panels for the new structure, doing what's called a hot roof for the entire structure. The whole structure is getting a new roof. And a hot roof is simply applying a closed cell spray foam to the underside of the roof deck, thereby bringing what's typically an attic space into the conditioned envelope. And what this allows us to do is develop a very tight and energy efficient building envelope. We then serve this building envelope with very high efficiency systems with those heat pumps. And of course, we power those systems with renewables at the end of the day. But of course, this takes a lot of education to understand how to do this. And one of the things that I decided to do was educate myself a little bit. And earlier this year at the house we currently live in Royal Oak, I actually installed about a 5.4 kilowatt system with a battery backup. And I wanted to do this to really understand the whole process, from sizing of the system to how you develop the cost, what the DTE requirements are, the City of Royal Oak requirements are. And it was worth it to me, despite the fact that I know that we're going to be leaving this home within the next 12 months, to make the investment to do this for those reasons. But also, again, I just think it's one thing from a climate change perspective that is a benefit in general. So I made the decision to do that. The anecdotal joke I always say is I don't have a master's in business or didn't go to get my MBA. I kind of have my street MBA in solar in terms of the investment that I made with this system, but I still think it was cheaper than a regular MBA. So this system's only been in for about 4.5 months. Year-to-date production is a little under 3,300 kilowatt hours, so it's performing quite well for us. And there were several lessons learned through installing that system, from both the process, DTE's process, City of Royal Oak, and some of the regulatory requirements, but also helps serve as a sizing aid for the system size that we will ultimately implement on the Green Lake project. Now, it's a little bit of fuzzy math, but what I was able to utilize this home for was a few different things. One, it gave me real world data of how my family utilizes the space from an energy perspective, particularly an electrical perspective, with a home that started out of an era very similar to the Greenleaf home. This home was built in 1941. And really did help me understand how I could look at sizing a system for the house that we're building. And so at the same time was a culmination, when the system was installed, was about the culmination of that sustainability plan. And I made the decision to start Solarize Royal Oak, which is, as John had mentioned, a grassroots program to kind of help connect those that are interested and answer questions and ultimately aggregate some buying for some benefit. We're about to have our third meeting coming up here on September 29th. So if there's anyone attending this Zoom that's in the Royal Oak or surrounding area, it's going to be held at City Hall in the evening. I encourage you to attend. But through, excuse me, through those efforts, we've been able to install a little under 18 kilowatts of solar within Royal Oak. And we're hoping that with the new tax credits that we can continue our momentum and get a lot more installed. So this kind of is a quick synopsis of the project. Really, it's a journey is what I keep referring to it as, because in this case, we are trying to maintain an existing structure and renovate it to a way that it is going to live a high performance life in the future. It's a beautiful home to begin with, and we wanted to maintain as much of it as possible. So we're really hoping to go from this, make our way through this process, which is the cracking of the egg before you can make the omelet, so to speak. We've concluded that deconstruction process. The current status of the project, the foundation is in. I did have a little bit of, I did have to succumb to the supply chain issues a little bit, in the sense that my structural insulated panels will not be arriving to the site until the beginning of October. So that has slowed us down a little bit, but there's plenty of work to do to get ready for those. That picture on the bottom right there is actually a photo of the existing garage, which the original intent was to maintain that garage as we were building over it. However, as you can see, the structure of that garage just was not something that would be able to build on. So unfortunately, we had to take that garage down and just to rebuild it in essence. However, you can see a little bit of the material there. That paneling that you're seeing there is actually beautiful 1x12 shiplap paneling that's all been salvaged. All of the roof rafters were deconstructed, so selectively removed individually, and all that material has been salvaged. But we're quickly getting to the point where the panels will arrive and we can start going vertical and eventually get to this. It's a bit of a change visually. The brick cladding is going to stay, but it's going to be receiving what's called a lime wash treatment. So the color will change a little bit. And if you can look in that bottom right picture there, ignore the pool for a second. That's still a discussion with my wife on what phase of the project that's going to come in at. But you can kind of see in the rendering there where the solar panels will be located. And the way that we approached it, in the sense that we're still not 100% sure what the size of the system will need to be, we looked at it from the standpoint of understanding what DTE's current process and limitations are. How much area do we have for panels? Based on that, what size of system could we put in there to kind of help establish the ceiling of what we would want to install? Now, I've done some fuzzy math, again, based on the learnings from the existing home and the size of the system and the usage patterns, as well as some energy modeling information that I have of the new home. And for anyone that's familiar with a HERS rating, we have an estimated HERS rating of 16 for the new home. And what that does is that allows me to understand how much more energy efficient the new construction, the new design is anticipated to be over a baseline home. And so I did some further sort of fuzzy math and assumed that both the existing 1935 and the existing 1941 home that we're currently in were as efficient as the baseline of the HERS program. The reality is they're significantly more inefficient. But what all that information does is help me understand that I think because we're building this home the way that we're building it with the systems that we're using, it's going to be significantly more energy efficient, which thereby brings our energy usage down considerably, which means ultimately the sizing of the system, I believe, will end up being somewhere in the 12 to 16 kilowatt range kilowatt hours for the size of the system. Again, what our goal is, if we move into the home next summer, I want to get at least 6 months of real world usage data to help validate system sizing concerns that I have, and hopefully begin the process of getting that system installed by the end of next year, but have that be based on actual real world data of what we need to do to get to net zero. I do know that it will require multiple batteries, at least 2, probably more than that. But again, that's really going to be a function of what the data will show us once we occupy the home. So that's a synopsis of what's going on. Again, just want to say thank you to everyone that's joining this, and I'm certainly open for any questions that people may have.
Well, that was fantastic, Woody. Thank you so much. So questions, either speak up or raise your hand and I'll call upon you. And every question is a good question. Jay, go ahead, sir.
If you do not export energy to DTE and you have a large enough battery bank, why would you want to at any time enter into any kind of a contract with DTE who wants to destroy solar anyway? Why not just go all out and have a large enough battery bank that you depend on that for all of your energy needs?
Well, it's a great question, and I will answer it stating that the fact that the design and the goal right now will include a grid-tied system doesn't necessarily mean that I will always want that umbilical cord there. At the same time, there are very real-world economic constraints in terms of the budget that we have to work with to build this home. It's certainly not going to be an inexpensive home. I don't make any, there's no doubt about that. The notion of putting in enough battery capacity to be able to get off the grid is one that I need the data to understand if that's something that's going to be viable for us. So the initial plan is to at least install enough battery capacity that we think is going to be possible to get us to net zero. After we have some real world and real usage data, to your point, as the technology gets better, we may add battery capacity to ultimately get off grid. So thank you for the question.
Woody, are you contemplating at all adding an electric car to the mix?
So I currently have an EV, and the design of the garage is actually going to have the infrastructure put in, not only for EV charging now, but to actually be able to facilitate pad charging in the future, so that it makes it a little bit easier for us. So yes, I'm planning for 2 at least level 2 chargers in that garage, as I drive an EV now, and I will make sure that my wife will have one in the future, and we actually have a new driver as of this year that will, if I have anything to say about it, will be in an EV as well.
Sounds great. Dale Klein.
You talked about having a hot roof. Can you talk about that versus other options? I guess, I mean, you get extra attic space with the hot roof, but what about just having the second story flat and then cellulose or something else like that over the top?
So yep, it's a good point, and there's many strategies that you can employ in that attic area. We chose to go with the hot roof, but in doing that, there are certainly some other considerations in the sense that when you see this application in other climate zones, so as an example down south or in other areas of the country where a lot of mechanical equipment is often located in that attic or interstitial space, there's specific considerations when you do have that equipment in there. In our case, we're not necessarily going to be using it for storage. You are in Michigan, you are allowed to build it the way we're doing it with the insulation on the bottom of the roof deck, but you are not allowed to then use that attic space for storage or place mechanical equipment in there. The reason that we're doing it the way that we're doing it is in the other examples that you offered, where we could employ other insulating strategies, but have those be at the ceiling level of that second floor, you still have the issue of the unconditioned attic space. directly in contact with the conditioned space below, sort of fighting with each other. And even though you could implement insulation strategies to help with that, the better bet is to really push that thermal envelope to your roof deck so that you don't have what really amounts to multiple interior spaces in conflict with each other from an energy perspective. They're not fighting with each other. So while we're not putting any mechanical equipment in our attic, we're not going to be using it for storage, we're still going to gain energy efficiency by not having that unconditioned space be directly adjacent to a conditioned space.
Sounds good. Paul?
Yeah, hi, Woody. Just, to kind of build on that, what is the R value that you're going for in your the spray foam that you're using in the roof? And what is the R value in the walls, both in the existing structure and in the SIP panels that you're gonna install?
So the easiest question to answer first is the SIP panels. We're using 6 5/8 inch SIP panels, which I believe is an R25 for those panels. The spray foam that's going into the existing exterior walls, of course, they are 2x4 walls, but we're actually going to be furring those out to get a little deeper wall cavity to essentially put in as much as to make it as a 2x6 cavity. And I should know this math offhand, pardon me. Oops. Those are going to be about an R37 because we're putting actually a little bit less than that, R35, because we're not going to fill the entire cavity. The biggest point to realize though with both of those is the air sealing component that comes along with both of those systems is really where we gain our biggest energy advantage. The existing walls, while again, the wall cavity is growing a little bit, that closed cell spray foam is sealing up that entire wall cavity and really, really helping to raise the performance level of the existing walls. One of the reasons I chose to go with the structural insulated panels for the new construction walls was not only for the energy efficiency, not only for the logistics and ease of construction, but really for the air sealing qualities that come along with those structural insulated panels.
And the roof, what R value in the roof?
So the roof, I haven't determined what our thickness of that is going to be. I'm still sort of playing around with whether it's going to be all closed cell spray foam, which you have to be very careful with in terms of thicker applications, or there's certainly the option to go with a hybrid approach, which is a closed cell spray foam to obtain your air sealing, and then an application of an open cell spray foam over top of that, which has a little bit of a lower performance level, a little bit of a lower cost, but you are able to apply that a little bit thicker. So it's really a balance of what makes the most sense performance-wise and what makes the most sense cost-wise. So I don't have an answer for you on what the ultimate R value of that roof deck is going to be, because I'm still sort of figuring out what the best approach is.
And why are you not using SIP panels in the roof in the new construction?
So it's a good question. The reason that I'm not using SIPs in the roof, one is a cost issue in the sense that they tend to be thicker panels because they are a roof. They tend to be a little bit more expensive. But also one of the issues that I ran into that I did not get a satisfactory answer from any of the SIP manufacturers with regards to roof panels and solar, which was actually quite shocking to me, was any consideration or special considerations that I would need to have in the manufacture of those panels to accommodate any sort of racking or installation of solar panels on this roof. All of the SIP manufacturers that I had asked that question to be quite honest, did not give me a satisfactory answer. Because the reality is, if you did not have additional structure, so traditional solar solar installed on a traditional roof is anchored to the roof framing that's holding that roof up, whether it be pre-engineered trusses or roof rafters. In a case of a SIP panel for a roof, the only structural member, framing member that's in that panel is at the panel joints. in the field of that panel is only the substrate, which would be a 7/16 inch thick layer of OSB typically. And so I was concerned about whether or not that would present challenges for me in installing solar in terms of being, confident that that system would be durable enough. And I'll be honest, I was very shocked that none of the manufacturers I asked that question to could give me a satisfactory answer on how I would be able to handle that, short of specially designing the panel so that it had structure in the areas where the racking would need to go. But the reality is that would then take away from the energy efficiency of the panel where I would need to do that. So that's one of the big reasons I didn't use it for the roof, in addition to a few other reasons.
Thanks. Great questions. Great questions, Paul. Lee.
Yeah, my question is about the bricks on the outside of the older house. You explained that it was a high quality build at the time when it was done, and maybe that's the best answer. But once you insulate the inside, the temperature of the bricks and their drying ability will be reduced when they're exposed to the weather. And does that play out at all with your white lime coating? So how are the bricks going to live?
So hopefully the bricks will continue their life the way they have been, in the sense that for the existing walls where the brick cladding is not coming down, because some of the construction detailing was some of the, I guess, more premium details of the day. I'm not as concerned with the breathability of that brick that's staying and not being touched. I've verified that the air gap and rain screen detail behind the brick cladding of the existing walls is quite durable and adequate. There should be plenty of airflow there to allow that brick to do what it needs to do to be durable there. On the new construction walls, I actually have a few different strategies that I'm going to be employing. One is a fluid applied vapor barrier that's going on the exterior walls, but then also have the ability to put an additional rain screen material on that cladding as well, to, again, a belt and suspenders sort of approach. As that reclaimed brick is reinstalled new, it will still be able to breathe just as it normally did, having that airspace behind it as it always did. Again, the original construction probably didn't have a great separation necessarily between that airspace and the home, but the brick itself was always separated. Now that we're coming in and we're sealing everything up, we're really sealing from the back of the airspace in, but from the airspace outboard to where the brick is all going to remain as it always has been, or be a much better performing modern detail. One of the other advantages of the lime wash detail that we're doing is the brick that we're saving as we reinstall it. We're actually not going to have any issues with the new mortar being obviously different than the existing, showing that we had any addition or infill, because as we do that lime wash treatment, which is more like a stain on the brick, that will actually homogenize all that mortar, which is one of the reasons we elected to go that route, knowing that that was going to be our finish at the end of the day. We didn't have any concerns aesthetically with marrying the old brick and new brick.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Hi, Woody. I noticed that you're planning both ground source heat pumps as well as the level 2 charger capability for an EV. Have you considered, together with that, the possibility of using DTE's time of use meters for heat pump systems, and factored in the costs associated, or the reduced costs associated with electricity using that arrangement?
Yep, absolutely. That's going to be a consideration, and it's actually part of the data gathering process that will be in that sort of initial 6-month period. The way that the electrical service is currently being designed is to have that separate geothermal meter from DTE. I have had experience with that in the past in other homes that I've built and other installations where it absolutely is an economic advantage, but that was with a fully grid tied system with no renewables in the picture at all. So that's part of what I'm going to be taking a look at to see what makes the most sense for us, our usage, our systems. One thing I will note is the home that I'm currently in. As I mentioned, I do drive an EV. I do have a charger, a level 2 charger at home for that EV. I do have a separate meter for that charger, which is a special rate from DTE for that electric vehicle. But I will be honest, one of the things that I'm finding is I'm not sure that I'm at an economic advantage by having that separate meter for my EV charging. And the reason for that is I still pay separate distribution charges for all the electricity that I use to charge that EV, as well as the separate distribution charges that I pay for the electricity coming to my home. So a typical bill for the EV meter from DTE for me has roughly 50% of the charges being my distribution charges. Now, I haven't gone through the exercise yet to find out if, because I believe when these pricing plans were originally created and the notion of having a separate meter, a discounted meter for your EV charging was probably absent of the knowledge of the cars having the technology to really charge themselves in a time of use fashion, meaning the car is set to only charge during off-peak hours, regardless of when I have it plugged in. Now, certainly I can manually tell it to charge at different times, but I have to actually run through the exercise to see if not being on the separate separate EV meter and just being on the regular house meter, but only charging during time of use and only paying the one distribution fee, if that makes an economic difference. Because right now, as my bill shows up, there's the bill for the house, the bill for the EV meter, all on the same bill. I'm always shocked as to the amount of electricity that I'm using to charge the car is actually quite minimal, but the bill ends up being quite a bit higher because I'm getting dinged for that additional distribution charge on an additional meter.
There are some nuances to the way DTE handles net metering on a time of use meter, particularly if you're talking about a ground source heat pump and the different rates they have between winter rates and summer rates, on peak and off peak. So, yeah.
So yeah, I would
it's worth
say
doing the math.
Yeah, definitely for the home that we're building, that is definitely the plan at the outset to take advantage of that pricing structure and that meter. Again, with the notion of wanting to get to net zero energy, as we generate that data and figure out the best strategy to do that, it may make sense to not have that meter at the end of the day based on how we ultimately power everything.
Yeah. If you have enough solar, it may not be as you describe and make less sense and want to keep it on a single meter.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to ask Alan what his question is, and then we got some questions on the chat, which I'm going to get to. Eileen's question, Dale's comment, Dwayne's comment. And so Alan, you're up.
Okay, I had stepped away for a moment. I don't know if this was addressed. What are you doing for heat recovery or ventilation? And also, are you doing any air quality testing, like CO2 measurements?
So to answer the first question, I'll go back to part of my presentation, which discussed building a very tight building envelope. Some folks in this presentation may have heard this phrase before, which is build tight, ventilate right. And basically what that means is if we are successful in our strategies to air seal the home, that does not absolve us of the requirement to still get proper fresh air exchange into that home. So in our case, what we are doing is actually installing what's called a heat recovery ventilator. Typically, the way I install these is actually have that ducted to the bathrooms, and it will double as the bathroom exhaust fan, because these heat recovery ventilators are designed to pull all of the, let's just say, stale air out of the home, exhaust it to the exterior, pull in fresh air from the exterior, but in doing that, actually recovers the heat before it exhausts the home to the exterior and actually dumps that heat into the incoming fresh air. So we are installing a heat recovery ventilator. We are going to be utilizing it the way I typically do, which is as the bathroom exhaust fans. And I apologize, what was your second question?
Are you doing any air quality monitoring, like CO2 level?
Initially, I had not planned on it, but that is actually something that I am considering. because we are making this home a little bit tighter than a typical home would be, and we have the opportunity to implement systems now that just help provide us much more data in general, it is something that I'm considering, but it wasn't part of our initial plan necessarily.
And one quick follow-up there. When you install the heat recovery, does the city still doesn't require that fresh air duct into the cold air return, does it? Does that take
Not
the
that I'm
place?
aware of. Yeah, I will sort of answer that with a little another anecdotal story. So one of the things that delayed the project a little bit from its outset was the fact that the city did request a full mechanical plan for what we were doing, which is not, they have every right to do that. It's not atypical, but it's a little bit atypical in terms of residential construction. I think due to the size of the home and being over this sort of arbitrary 3,500 square foot limit that the state and the city has, is why they requested that. We do not have anything like that planned as part of our mechanical design. The mechanical inspector did not raise that issue with us. And to the extent that we can limit the amount or control, I should say, control and limit the amount of exterior air that's being put into the interior systems, we want to be able to do that. So it's not a requirement that I'm aware of, at least not for our project.
Okay, we're going to go to the chat now. Eileen has a question. Why are you doing both ground and air heat pumps?
Great question. So I apologize for not walking through the actual design of the home and the floor plan and all that. I figured it would sort of take away from the discussion, but one of the reasons for that is the design of the garage element, and I refer to that very specifically in the sense that the existing garage is where the batteries and everything for the solar is going to be located. We're adding a 3-car garage onto that, but that whole and my wife and I's offices are going to be above that. That's sort of its own structure altogether. It is accessed from the interior of the home, but it is essentially its own structure. And it just made more sense in terms of the design of the mechanical systems to where our ground source heat pump, so our geothermal system, we have the benefit of a fairly large lot. We're just over 1/3 of an acre, which is fairly rare for Royal Oak, but that does give us the opportunity to put in a ground source heat pump with, we're doing 6 100-foot deep vertical wells in the backyard. And that system will serve what we'll essentially just call the main house. So the original home structure, the addition that we're building, and the new second floor, that will all be served with the ground source heat pump. Because the garage element in and of itself is sort of a separate structure, so to speak, we're going to be serving that with the air source heat pumps. The spaces themselves are going to be utilized very differently. Again, it's offices for my wife and I, and then primarily garage. Now, the garage is being planned to be a conditioned space. So we are going to have actually 3 heads for the heat pump unit in the garage, one in the garage where the batteries will go. So we can keep that climate controlled and keep the batteries operating at optimal conditions. And then another 2 heads in the rest of the garage, just to keep it minimally conditioned. And then a head in both my office and my wife's office. So the reason for that really is the project itself and the way the house is sort of laying itself out really lent itself to 2 separate systems, with the garage element really not requiring a ground source, and really logistically it being a lot easier to go with the air source.
Okay, we're gonna bounce to Dwayne. Had a question about how are you planning on powering your hot water heater? You're not going to use natural gas, or are you?
So the natural gas, the statement on natural gas is, I'm going to be plumbing the house for natural gas, but more than likely not even landing a gas meter, because as you may have noticed in the systems discussion, we are not planning for any appliances that require any natural gas. Typically in systems past, I've actually installed a geothermal system with an element that's called a de-superheater, which essentially provides you with preheated hot water for your hot water system, and those would typically be electric hot water heaters. In this particular case, we're actually going to be going with an air source heat pump water heater. over time and working with my geothermal contractor, we've just sort of discovered that, efficiency wise, it's just a better way to go. And especially with the way that we're installing our system, our plan is, rather than to go with the de-superheater option, we're just going to be going with a traditional air source water heater, but still being able to take advantage of the water that's being fed into that water heater is still preheated based on the geothermal system.
We have 12 minutes left and we have 3 more questions that are lined up. I want to go to Dale real quickly. Dale, you want to have a follow-up comment regarding the separate meters for EV, or are you set?
I'm probably all set, but the separate EV meter is just more complicated. If you already have time of use, you would do a spreadsheet and see how much different the rates are, but the regular time of use rate is pretty good. And somebody else commented about geothermal. The winter daytime geothermal rate is a bit lower, but you'd have to do a spreadsheet to see if it's going to work out differently, especially if your solar is not on that one. Your solar is probably on your main meter. But
Okay, sounds good. Abraham.
I wondered whether you do consulting.
I certainly am willing to. I tend to get very yappy when I get into these discussions because I'm very passionate about it, and I like to talk a lot about it. So I'm absolutely willing to help you with whatever you might have.
Great.
Sounds
Have you, another quick one is, did you consider standing seam roofs, metal roofs on top of the on top of a SIP panel roof?
So actually, there is standing seam metal for a portion of this project. It's actually not going to be on the, well, we're not using SIP panels for the roof, but it's the roofing material for this project is a combination of traditional asphalt shingles and standing seam metal, really just based on a design aesthetic that we were going for.
Did standing seam, could that work with the SIP panel, with a SIP panel roof, or was that not considered?
To my knowledge, a standing seam roof could work with a SIP panel roof. There's no limitations there that I'm aware of. Kind of like if you imagine the roof essentially being just a horizontal wall to a certain degree. The cladding material that would go on the exterior is really open to whatever creative design interpretation you may have. From what I understand, there's nothing that would preclude you from doing a standing seam metal roof over a SIP panel roof.
Since it may be easier to apply solar panels.
Oh, well,
without penetrations.
Yeah, you would. Again, I posed this question to all the SIP manufacturers, and none of them gave me a confidence-inspiring response of how I could approach this with that concern. So I didn't look into the ability to install standing seam and whether or not that was durable enough to attach the solar to or not. But we don't have standing seam throughout the project either, so it's a little bit of a different issue.
Okay, we've got a question from Clyde. Did you consider or compare just bio fiber hempcrete blocks versus SIP?
I did not, but I will give you a little bit of information with regards to our choice of the SIP panel. One, it is something that I have experience with. I've built several homes using SIP panels, and really am a big believer in the product from various different reasons. But one other item that was interesting to me when I was originally trying to understand which systems to use and budgeting for the home. Earlier this year, actually, or late last year, when we were budgeting for the home, to go with a stick framed with continuous exterior insulation, spray foam in the cavity wall system, actually ended up being more expensive, about as expensive as my SIP panels. Now, my previous experience has always been that SIP panels are a cost premium to traditional stick frame construction. When I was originally budgeting, and it's a function of just supply chain and the cost of building materials going up from a stick frame perspective, they were really close to being on par. So from my perspective, if I was going to have to pay roughly the same amount, I elected to go with SIP panels for all the advantages that I was well aware of. In addition to the fact that I'm doing a lot of this work on my house by myself, and it's going to be a lot easier for me to actually tip up a SIP panel wall than it is to stick frame a wall. But also, there was another point I wanted to make on the stick frame versus SIPs. But anyways, that was sort of it. It's the cost element and all the other high performance details led me to the SIPs. Oh, that was it. The SIPs were on par with the stick framing, cost, not considering the insulation in the cavity still. So layering that additional cost on top of it would have made a traditional stick framed wall, even with high performance building details of a continuous exterior insulation, with a high performance insulation in the cavity, would have been significantly more expensive than the route that we're going with the 6-inch SIP panels, oddly.
Dale, you had your hand up a minute ago. Do you have another final question? Okay. Are there any other people that want to ask Woody a question? We have a couple minutes left. Nobody? Okay. Well, I just want to thank Woody for a very fascinating presentation. I think you may have a client, a potential client in here. As always, since you're all our members at GLREA, we always encourage members to contact other members for advice or suggestions. And so I'm sure Woody would be more than happy to entertain emails or phone calls from anybody who has any follow-up questions. Again, I want to thank our sponsors. And for anybody that's not a GLREA member, I want to encourage you to become members. We're a membership-based organization. Your membership dues help us do this work and expanding renewable energy throughout Michigan. And again, I want to thank Woody. Woody, do you have any final comments you want to share before we sign off?
No, other than just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share the story. We're definitely very excited about the home. I'm excited about how we're building it and the storyline that goes along with it. The home is giving back to me so much more than I ever would have thought I could get out of a project like this. And I just want to thank everyone that attended this evening and took time out of their evenings to listen to my spiel.
And when you finish your film or your video, can we maybe have you come back again and maybe share the film?
Absolutely. And everyone will be able to access it, because the goal of that, again, it was centered around being able to educate the community. So the videos will actually be posted on the City of Royal Oaks sustainability page for residents or anyone to access those videos at their leisure to learn more about some of these strategies that I highlighted today.
And just so everybody else, we have our annual solar home tour on Thursday, October 6th, I think it is. It's a Thursday night. So we're going to be able to highlight at least four solar systems on that Thursday. So stay tuned for more announcements about that. But with that, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and stay tuned for more announcements for our next solar stories that will be coming up. Have a great evening.